Our coverage of CES 2026 from Las Vegas, Nevada is brought to you by Asus, MSI, Thermaltake, and Gigabyte. Hey guys, I'm visiting Cyberpower. They're a system integrator, so they build complete systems that they sell directly to people. They're also available from some major websites such as Newegg. They specifically design a lot of stuff themselves though, because having in-house parts is a great way to help keep overall costs down as a system integrator. So I have two new cases here I'm going to share with you guys today. One of them is actually made by Phanteks, and they have a Cyberpower exclusive version. So over here in the corner next to the banner, which has the name, which is the EXO 626, that's going to be the Phanteks version of this case that will be available in the future. The 626S is the Cyberpower specific version. So you will not be able to get a full system in this case from any other system integrators aside from Cyberpower. The Phanteks EXO 626S Black is the one we're showing off right here. And I want to point out right from the get-go, this is an early sample that they mocked up for the show, so they're still developing this product, although we're expecting it to launch around the April timeframe. And at that point, you should be able to order systems with this case from Cyberpower. That is why, for example, the LEDs here, not quite as smooth and diffused as I think Phanteks typically has their standard set to, but they're planning to fix that in the future. But with that said, if you're looking at the layout of this case, you might be like, it almost looks like half a case. This is reminding me a little bit of that case that Thermaltake did with BMW Design Group USA quite a few years back. But what they've done is given you a dedicated housing along the right side, which has some mesh ventilation, and you can see that is where the AIO is connected for the CPU. The tubes come out of this chamber, which has the motherboard inside it, and into the side of the case, and this is a 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler from Cyberpower. Then you have two chambers over here. This chamber is for the graphics card, and they said it's large enough to basically fit any GPU on the market. Asterisk, they're testing with all the cards that are currently available. But for example, like the Gigabyte massive RTX 5090, the Aorus version of that, should fit in here, which means pretty much anything up to 4-slot configuration. Above that, you have the motherboard area, and that does have a piece of tempered glass over it. It's a smaller piece of tempered glass, which is actually kind of nice. It means it's a little bit easier to take off and snap back on. And that also gives you an up-close look at your AIO and your memory in there, because everyone wants to show off their memory these days. You know, it's kind of a bit of a statement piece to even own memory in this day and age. Of course, this does mean height clearance is going to be a little bit of an issue, so you're probably going to want to go with an AIO for this system. Of course, that is what Cyberpower will ship it with, but I'm talking about theoretically if you were going to get the case directly from Phanteks in the future, for example. And then below the motherboard, there's another panel that's removable, and then below that we have a larger chamber that houses the power supply and a little bit of extra room in there if you have cables that you need to manage. Taking a look at the back, we can see where the power supply is actually mounted. We got a quick disassembly of this case just to show us kind of how everything works and fits together. For instance, the rear panel here just pops out. There's actually a supplemental 120mm fan on the back of that because with this configuration, some heat can build up behind the motherboard tray, so they have a fan just to evacuate that from the area. And that is where you will also have access to the 360mm AIO radiator, for example, as well as the cable management below that. The GPU shroud also slides off from the back, and it actually also has some magnetic connectors that pop into place. That gives the RGB LED its power and its RGB signal, and when reinstalling it pops back on and that RGB strip lights up. With that piece removed, you can then remove the tempered glass side panel piece above it, as well as the extra cover piece that they have below that, and that will give you pretty much full access to your motherboard. Current system that we're showing here is a Core Ultra 9 285K processor from Intel, an RTX 5080 Founders Edition from NVIDIA, as well as an Asus TUF Gaming Z890 Pro Wi-Fi motherboard and 32 gigs of DDR5 6400 dual channel memory. So there's your first look at an overview of the Phanteks EXO 626S Black case as featured in the Cyberpower edition. Very cool case. I like the unique design, and I also like the airflow access because obviously you're not going to have anything obstructing your radiator, for example. So let me know what you guys think of this one. Leave me some comments down below if you like it. And now we're going to check out the other case that Cyberpower has. So this is the case that caught my attention, and I wanted to stop by so you guys could get a closer look at it. And now that I've had a rundown of some of the features and specs and some of the design work that's gone into this, I'm quite impressed. This is the MA01. This is the matte beige version that we're looking at right here. There's also a metallic dark silver version that you can see right here. And then this is the matte dark steel gray. They also might be working on some other colors for this as well, but they didn't want to go like just black and just white. They wanted to sort of tweak the colors a little bit with some attention to detail and giving you something that was a little bit different than the typical all black, all white type of chassis. So first off, you don't want your computer to be loud, and they've done some work on that. But you might notice this has a unique mesh that goes across the top, and this is actually a stainless steel mesh. They also might be doing this in a standard steel as well, because the version of the case that we're looking at right here has a $250 price tag when it eventually reaches the retail market if you're purchasing the case by itself. But that is largely because of this specially designed stainless steel mesh top. To round out the pricing though, it's also going to be available with a standard steel mesh top that is the same design as this, but that's going to be $150. And then here on the metallic dark silver version, we have a more standard mesh top. This is going to be $130. That's a pretty competitive MSRP for a case that has this type of look. That's also going to include 6 fans. That's a triple fan and a single frame at the bottom, a double 120, also with the single frame on the side, and then a final 120 on the back. Getting back to the acoustic features of this case, if you're an audiophile and you have like a high-end microphone, you might recognize the look of this mesh. Because it's an interlaced mesh, it means all the little holes are slightly different size. That's going to reduce harmonic vibration and the amount of noise that your case emits, especially when the fans start to spin up at higher speeds as heat is generated. And then the second major design feature that is tuned towards keeping things quiet is going to be these channels that you can see down at the bottom. Now, if you look at it from the side, you'll notice that you can't see the fans, and that was a big part of the design of this case, is keeping everything nice and clean inside. So really all you're going to have is your system that's in there. You're not going to be able to see the fans. They even have this panel over here that covers up the screws that mount your PCI Express expansion slots. That slides in a very satisfactory way, but it also has the function of holding down the panel that goes across the bottom. So if you're going to be popping those off, which you can do from the inside, they just have some tabs that hold them on. That will also release the one in the back, and then you can get around to the one on the side as well. As we have seen with some more recent case airflow testing, depending on the fan configuration you have in your case, having more fans is not always the best, because you can have a situation where air might be drawn in from one location and then it just gets sent up and out of the case and doesn't do any good for the cooling inside. So for that reason, all of the channels that you can see along these plastic shrouds are angled or louvered in such a way that it directs the airflow from the fans in and towards the motherboard to make sure that you're actually making use of the airflow rather than just having it piped in one area and then sent out the other. I have been assured by Cyberpower that these mesh panels, although they do look like they're fairly thick, if you flip them over and look at them from the angle that the channels are louvered, you can see there's actually plenty of space there. It's just that when you look at it from the outside of the case, it is specifically designed in a way that it hides the fans while also providing that directed airflow. And while I didn't have time to do extensive temperature testing, I can say that with the side panel pulled off, I could just feel in there that there's definitely a lot more air pressure and flow going in directed towards the motherboard. And they've even done the rear panel in such a way that it's going to pull air out and sort of that way, if that makes sense. You can't see it from the back, so it's okay. The other really cool feature of this case, as it is called the MA01, that stands for modern analog. So you actually have analog dials here that you can use to control the RGB lighting. You've also got your front panel I/O up here, and they've also taken the extra step of like actually making a little housing around each of those plugs. So again, just a lot of attention to detail with this case that I really appreciate. Same goes for the power button right there. But for anyone who hates motherboard RGB control software, or maybe people don't even use it because they get their case set up and they're like, I don't want to bother with that, or I don't want to use up background resources. You have these 3 knobs, which are analog control of the RGB lighting for the fans. And yes, that does mean that the controller for these, which is mounted behind the motherboard tray, is also included, even with the $130 version of the case. So by default right now, this bottom knob, if you turn it, will switch between different lighting modes that you might have seen before. They got some spiral action there. You can switch it all the way over to the standard RGB unicorn vomit. The one in the middle controls the brightness, so you can automatically dim those LEDs if you so desire, or brighten them back up. And then the one on top will cycle between a few different preset color modes. So if you don't want all of the RGB, you can go with a subtle variation of like some blue, red, and pink right here. I kind of like this one. It's got some mostly blue with, again, a little bit of pink going through it. But that gives you some quick presets you can do. But if you push in the knob, then it will give you actual granular control over the 256 different levels that is inherent in every RGB controller, because you have a red LED, a green LED, and a blue LED. In most typical LED configurations, each of those can have between 1 and 256 levels of brightness. And by adjusting those individually, as when you tap each of these or push them in, it switches over to controlling red, green, and blue. And then you can twist them one way or another to get yourself some more subtle color variations that typically aren't available on a lot of RGB control software, or that might just require a lot of tweaking in order to get right. And you can see right here as I twist that one all the way to the left, and again, 256 levels. So you gotta spin it a lot one way or the other to get exactly where you wanna go. Then you can see the new color that we've created, as is also displayed by this bit of accent glow that also goes along the bottom side of the case. There, as you can see, I have now made the case look like it's on fire, or very hot inside. Which it shouldn't be, because there's all these fans. And the case also seems like it has good airflow. Again, this is just anecdotal since we're just looking at some early models of the case here. This case has won a Best of CES award for this year, so that's pretty cool from Yanko Design. And here again is just a quick look at the two other variants. The metallic dark silver has some orange accents. Actually, they all have orange accents on the buttons. And just a great showcase build to show off, especially if you really like the super clean builds that don't show any cables or that show minimal cables. And if I didn't mention, this case is also, of course, fully compatible with all the reverse connector motherboards, because in a case like this where you're going for the clean look, that's probably the kind of motherboard you're going to want to use. And here is one more look at the matte dark steel gray variant. Expect this to be available as a pre-built system, in this case coming at Best Buy in April, and then we're looking at probably the June, possibly July timeframe for them to be available for the DIY market to be purchased as a standalone case that you could build your own system in. But that is all the time I have for here at the Cyberpower Suite at CES 2026. I want to say a big thank you to them for inviting me over, and a big thank you to my sponsors for CES, Gigabyte, Asus, MSI, and Thermaltake. If you guys are enjoying my content, check out the playlist in the video's description. You can also find a link to my store down there. We do have more videos, so stay tuned. We'll see you all in the next one.